Hey everybody, Dr. G here. I'm a clinical and forensic psychologist as well as a body language expert, and today we're going to be analyzing the behavior and body language of former FBI Director James Comey. Before we get started, a couple of quick things. One, I wanted to make sure you know this is not a psychological evaluation of any kind. These are just my opinions. In addition to that, I do want to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, let's go. Former FBI Director James Comey was indicted on charges of making false statements as well as obstruction of justice. This allegedly occurred during a Senate Judiciary Committee meeting on September 30th, 2020, which is exactly what we're going to be analyzing today. Specifically, we're going to be looking at an interaction between Senator Ted Cruz and James Comey. Let's just jump right in.
In your judgment, was the way that the FBI handled the Russia investigation, the surveillance of the Trump campaign, the Carter Page FISA application, the Michael Flynn investigation, was that handled in a competent and honest way?
For Senator Cruz, there was no, to my knowledge, surveillance of the Trump campaign. I think the overall investigation of the Russian interference and whether Americans were associated with it was conducted in an honest, competent, independent way.
Now, this is going to be a little bit trickier than our average body language analysis because you have to keep in mind that James Comey was the head of the FBI. So he is going to be somebody that really does understand how to speak about these kinds of things as well as handle a tremendous amount of pressure. But I'm going to point out a few things about his body language so you can better understand what we're seeing.
For Senator Cruz, there was no, to my knowledge, surveillance of the Trump campaign. I think the overall investigation of the Russian interference and whether Americans were associated with it was conducted in an honest, competent, independent way.
Okay.
Now, one thing that I'm noticing is that his blink rate is quite high. Now, I've watched James Comey speak quite a bit, and I'm probably going to do more videos on this because he has testimony from 2017 that's different. That's not what these charges are related to, but it covers some of the same material. And his presentation is wildly different. He's someone that tends to appear very calm. He's someone that tends to have a friendly inflection to his voice. So there's a lot of things, a lot of moving parts that we tend to look at, or that I tend to watch when I've seen James Comey speak. Now, he seems more pressured during this than he typically does. His blink rate is higher than usual.
The Trump campaign, I think the overall investigation of the Russian interference and whether Americans were associated with it was conducted in an honest, competent, independent way.
Okay. So, Mr. Comey,
Now, James Comey is somebody that raises his eyebrows a lot when he's trying to emphasize. That's a very common part of his body language. But he doesn't do that right now when he's talking about the fact that he believes it was all honest and competent. He's not raising his eyebrows. And what that means is that when we are talking about something we really feel strongly about, it's going to make you really pay attention to what we're saying. When we don't really want people to listen, we might stop raising our eyebrows. That could be that we're trying to control the way that our face looks as much as possible. So to me, it's actually meaningful that he doesn't raise his eyebrows right here.
The Trump campaign, I think the overall investigation of the Russian interference and whether Americans were associated with it was conducted in an honest, competent, independent way.
Okay. So, Mr. Comey, you're saying it.
So as you can see, he raised his eyebrows right afterward, but not during it. So to me, that speaks to that he was trying to not emphasize that statement.
Honest, competent, independent way.
Okay. So, Mr. Comey, you're saying it's competent and honest. I assume you've read the Horowitz Inspector General report, which found 17 significant errors or omissions in the Carter Page FISA application. So in your view...
Now, if you're not familiar with what's being talked about, this gets very complicated. It would take me an entire video just to explain the FISA application, Carter Page, all of these things. This all goes back to when Hillary Clinton ran for president. It's all very complicated. So we're just going to focus on the body language today. But if you're not familiar with the background of this, there's a lot to it.
17 mistakes lying to the court is competent and honest?
Well, I've read the report. I don't believe he concluded there were lies to the court, but there are significant and important failings in the way in which the Carter Page FISA was.
Now, this is something else I've also seen James Comey frequently do, is that when he speaks, his eyebrows go up like this, which we typically do when we feel sad. So I don't think that he is feeling sad right now, but I think that he has an awareness of his body language. I think this is somebody that probably understands his body language. So in some ways, I feel like that is to give a specific impression of himself. The fact that his eyebrows go up this way is a way to present how he wants to present. So that actually would be intentional body language, or maybe something that he has trained himself to do.
Well, I've read the report. I don't believe.
That's what I was talking about right there.
He concluded there were lies to the court, but there are significant and important failings in the way in which the Carter Page FISA was prepared and renewed.
Now, right here, I want you to look at the corner of his mouth. we're seeing just a little bit of contempt. That's when one side of the mouth goes up, just a little bit. You're going to see more later, but I want to point out, keep an eye out on this side of the mouth.
Mr. Comey, let's go directly to lies. The Inspector General report concluded that Mr. Klein Smith, an attorney who worked for you in the FBI, deliberately altered an email. He had emailed the CIA to ask if Carter Page was a source. The CIA came back and said, yes, he was a source. And Mr. Klein Smith, your lawyer, altered that email to add the words, not a source, to make the email say precisely the opposite of what the CIA said, and that fraudulent document was then used as a basis for a fraudulent submission to the FISA court. You believe that is honest and competent, Mr. Comey?
I don't believe you've offered an accurate summary of the Horowitz's findings.
Now, see how plain his face is after that? This is someone who does have, I believe, strong control over how his face looks, and that he knows just to go neutral rather than to give anything when somebody's asking you tough questions like this. So you'll watch that when he's being asked difficult questions by Senator Cruz, he does tend to go more blank when he's done speaking.
To the FISA court. You believe that is honest and competent, Mr. Comey?
I don't believe you've offered an accurate summary of the Horowitz's findings.
No body language on his face at all during that statement right there. And that in and of itself is telling, particularly for somebody like James Comey. Typically when he speaks, he has a warm way of speaking. You're not hearing anything like that. And he even does that to people that disagree with him. If you go back and watch some of his older testimony, the way that he's speaking and presenting right now is actually a good bit different. But he's giving absolutely nothing. He's showing no emphasis on his face, which is unusual for him.
Mr. Comey, I have the report right in front of me. Page 254 describes how the lawyer, specifically the words "and not a source," had been inserted in the response, directly reversing what the CIA says. Was it practice in your FBI to fraudulently alter evidence that you submit to federal courts?
It was not the practice in the FBI to fraudulently alter anything as presented to federal courts.
So you can see the eyebrows go up when things are really important to him. That was an insulting question, and one that I think made him quite angry. But that's when he really wanted to make sure that Ted Cruz heard.
Alter evidence that you submit to federal courts?
It was not the practice in the FBI to fraudulently alter anything as presented to federal courts.
You saw how he said anything. We're seeing anger there. You saw the corners of his mouth go up. He was baring his teeth a little bit. There is genuine anger behind that statement.
It was not the practice in the FBI to fraudulently alter anything as presented to federal courts.
Now, one thing that I think is interesting is that when he's doing this, he's nodding forward to emphasize. Usually people shake their head to emphasize, particularly when they're talking about something they disagree with. It's interesting to me that he's nodding his head forward. That's unusual.
Again, I believe your predicate is inaccurate, but I first learned of the Steele dossier in late September of 2016.
All right, now when he said late September of 2016, the blink rate picked up a lot. That suggests a lot of stress saying that. Oftentimes we associate that with deception, but that's very interesting that the blink rate picked up so much. Watch this right here.
But I first learned of the Steele dossier in late September of 2016 and understood that it was funded by political opposition to President Trump. Or candidate Trump. I didn't know the specifics of which part of the opposition, but I knew that it was political opposition research funded.
When? When did you learn that?
I talked about contempt. That is exactly what I'm talking about that right there. That is specifically a look of contempt.
It was political opposition research funded.
When? When did you learn that?
As soon as he asked when, that's a question he does not want to answer.
Tell the FISA court, why did you omit that over and over and over again on applications you submitted? Didn't the court deserve to know that?
My recollection is the FISA court was alerted to the possibility.
Now, he's answering the question, but what his body language is saying is, I don't know how to answer this question. Both shoulders go up. He's shaking his head. Watch the body language as he responds.
My recollection is the FISA court was alerted to the possibility that it was a politically biased reporting.
And now he's squinting. We do that when we're talking about things that we don't like. So once again, doesn't like answering this question.
My recollection is the FISA court was alerted to the possibility that it was a
eyebrows go down, eyes are squinting. This is not something he particularly feels like talking about.
Politically biased reporting.
Your recollection is false. The FISA court was not told that it was funded by the DNC. That's one of the omissions that your FBI did repeatedly to the federal court. All right. Another. Go ahead.
That's not what I just said. So.
What did you just say?
I said, my recollection is the court was alerted that there was potential political bias in this reporting.
Now we're hearing more strain in James Comey's voice right now. I think that he's starting to feel more frustrated. He's someone that, like I said, tends to be able to stay very cool, calm, and collected. So when you get any real emotion out of him, it seems notable.
What did you just say?
I said, my recollection is the court was alerted that there was potential political bias in this reporting.
Political bias is different from saying it was funded by the Hillary Clinton campaign. You just testified to this committee. You were specifically aware of that, and yet you repeatedly did not inform the court of it when you were getting an order to essentially weaponize the Democratic opposition research. All right, next question. When did you learn that the primary subsource, so the basis for this garbage Steele dossier, was a suspected Russian asset? Spies against the U.S. government. You have a Russian agent that is the basis for an FBI investigation, and the FBI is the one who had investigated them. Your testimony is you didn't know. Did it occur to you to ask? Did you ask any questions or do any due diligence on this at all?
I don't remember anything about the facts that have been revealed recently about the subsource. And as I said earlier, I think that cuts both ways, but I don't know how the people...
Now watch his shoulder right here.
All?
I don't remember anything about
So there was one shoulder of saying, I don't remember anything about it. Typically, when somebody really doesn't remember it, they really don't know something, typically we see both shoulders. One is a lot less committed. What I'm talking about here is his left shoulder, the one on the right side of the screen.
Or do any due diligence on this at all?
I don't remember anything about the facts that have been revealed recently about the subsource. And as I said earlier, I think that cuts both ways, but I don't know how the people running the investigation thought about it.
On May 3rd, 2017, in this committee, Chairman Grassley asked you point blank, quote, have you ever been an anonymous source in news reports about matters relating to the Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation? You responded under oath, quote, never. He then asked you, quote, have you ever authorized someone else at the FBI to be an anonymous source in news reports about the Trump investigation or the Clinton administration? You responded again under oath, no. Now, as you know, Mr. McCabe, who works for you, has publicly and repeatedly stated that he leaked information to the Wall Street Journal and that you were directly aware of it and that you directly authorized it. Now, what Mr. McCabe is saying and what you testified to this committee cannot both be true. One or the other is false. Who's telling the truth?
I can only speak to my testimony. I stand by what the testimony you summarized that I gave in May of 2017.
Now watch his body right here. You're going to see him leaning forward. Now sometimes we do that because we're trying to feel emotionally closer to somebody, but I don't think that's what's going on here. I think that there's discomfort, so he's starting to move around in his seat because that was a pretty intense question. Watch this right here.
It's false. Who's telling the truth?
I can only speak to my testimony. I stand by what...
As you can see, he hasn't really moved around at all during this. So the fact that this is one of the most consequential questions, and he's starting to move around now, suggests that there's some real discomfort here.
Testimony you summarized that I gave in May of 2017.
So your testimony is you've never authorized anyone to leak.
You can also see there's a lot of tension on his face right here.
I gave in May of 2017.
See, you got to think about with body language, most of it's involuntary. So if we're really trying to make sure we don't give anybody anything, then we make our face as neutral as possible. And that's what he tends to do when he's done speaking, is to forcibly make his face neutral.
So your testimony is you've never authorized anyone to leak. And Mr. McCabe, if he says contrary, is not telling the truth. Is that correct?
Again, I'm not going to characterize Andy's testimony, but mine is the same today.
All right, I'm going to make...
Now, there's a technique he just used where he said, I'm not going to characterize Andy's testimony. Using somebody's first name makes it seem more relatable. It makes you seem more connected to them. I've seen him do this before when he was talking about Robert Mueller. I think he referred to him as Rob or Robert or something like that, but he used his first name rather than typically in these hearings people say Mr. McCabe, Mr. Mueller, whatever it is. So the fact that he uses first names is meant to suggest that he's close to them and is also meant to give an impression of warmth. It's supposed to soften the way that his statements sound.
Again, I'm not going to characterize Andy's testimony, but mine is the same today.
See, that's very specific. So in other words, that's a way of reminding you we're friends, we're connected. So that's very much intentional, an intentional use of statements like that, an intentional use of first names like that.
And Mr. McCabe, if he says contrary, is not telling the truth. Is that correct?
Again, I'm not going to characterize Andy's testimony, but mine is the same today.
All right, we'll go ahead and wrap things up here. Hopefully this is helping you better understand some of the behavior and body language that we saw. What was interesting from former FBI Director James Comey was that his body language was very controlled. He does tend to be somebody who has a warmer way of speaking. He's somebody that tends to appear more relaxed than he did today. The exchanges between him and Ted Cruz, to me, there was a lot of tension underneath, and there did seem to be a lot of self-soothing behavior, which might imply that there was some deception involved. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be going back and looking at other testimony that might be relevant. Now, while the charges are specifically related to this, it ties into previous testimony that he's given, but these charges are not applicable to the older stuff just because of the statute of limitations. If you have any other thoughts about this, or if there's anything else you want me to analyze, please let me know in the comments below. Last thing before we get finished up is I do want to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, thanks for watching.